During the Middle Ages, the only way to protect a village was with a castle. Most castles were huge and were able to withstand fierce attacks, but none were invulnerable. Attackers used the best weapons available against a castle. Some weapons were incredibly advanced for their time, but many were very crude. Some were better for protecting a castle, but most were better attacking a castle. However crude or advanced they were, though, they were all effective. Offense. These weapons were used against defenders during sieges of castles. Catapult. The catapult is a very simple weapon. Basically, it has such great pressure on the ropes holding it down that when it is released, it projects whatever it's holding to great distances. Sometimes, catapults were loaded with many objects to throw in instead of one. They were then called mangonels. Watch what it looks like. Spreading diseases. Although trebuchets and catapults almost always threw rocks or big objects, they occasionally threw dead cows, which carried diseases. This tactic was especially effective if the cow carried the plague, which killed almost everyone who was infected. Ballista. This is a ballista. They are set on an angle like this so that they can fire over the wall. That is the giant arrow that it fires. It is generally a sharpened tree trunk. The ballista is really like a giant crossbow. The ballista is a very functional siege weapon. Battering ram. These doors may look impenetrable, but soon we'll get through them. The only way to break down those doors is with a battering ram. Lucky for us, we have one, and it's covered, which protects the soldiers inside that are pushing it from arrows and falling rocks. With normal battering rams, soldiers have to rely on their own strength to swing the battering ram, and they are exposed to enemy archers. However, with this type of battering ram, the soldiers have a mechanical advantage because the actual ram itself is hanging on ropes from the roof of it. They only have to push it, and they are protected. It's only a matter of time. Ladder. The ladder is a very simple siege device. It's a ladder that's high enough to reach the walls and that soldiers can climb up. There were generally a few ladders trying to reach the wall because soldiers carrying the ladders could be killed by arrows, and even if the soldiers did succeed in propping it against the wall, ladders were frequently kicked back down. Siege tower. This is a siege tower. It was used to climb to the tops of the walls and also offer protection for the troops inside. If this massive weapon can successfully travel and hook onto the walls, it means a one-way ticket into the castle for invading forces. There's an opening at the back for soldiers to climb aboard. Inside the tower, there is a ladder which lets the soldiers climb to the height of the walls. There were usually openings or spaces at the tops for archers to shoot. In case of burning oil or fire arrows, siege towers were frequently covered with animal skins because they were fire deterrents. Siege towers were generally made in the vicinity surrounding the castle because they were hard to move to great distances and because they had a better idea of the wall's height. Bombard. This advanced weapon is called a bombard. It is basically a cannon. It has a fuse that, when it's lit, explodes gunpowder behind a cannonball, propelling it at very fast speeds. A very large version of this, the Great Turkish Bombard, was used in the sack of Constantinople. It weighed over 40,000 pounds. The bombard was very destructive. Trebuchet. This medieval siege weapon was highly destructive to castles, but mainly walls. This is the bucket which holds the thing the attackers are firing. This is the counterweight. It balances out the rest of the throwing arm. Trebuchets were usually very far from the walls compared to other siege weapons, as they could throw a lot farther. It was more complex than the catapult because it used counterweights, was larger, and used more moving parts. Let's look at it in action. Defense. These weapons were used by the defenders in a castle against attackers outside of it. Parapets. During attacks on castles, defenders and archers could hide behind these parapets. They offered great protection and probably were the reason why many castles survived a siege. Mounted catapult. Common defense in the Middle Ages was a catapult inside or on top of the castle. It would work just the same as other catapults. Falling logs. Although falling logs are a simple idea, they could be very devastating. If there are many attackers in a line, defenders would cut the rope holding the logs up, and down the logs went, crushing everything and everyone in their path. Rocks were also thrown down, especially at attackers climbing up a ladder that had been propped up on the wall. Boiling oil. Like the falling logs, boiling oil would be used if enemies were close to the walls. The defenders would pour out cauldrons full of oil that had been put in a fire very recently. It would fall on and burn anyone underneath it.